I'm Kes Maro. My pronouns are they, he, and I'm a mixed media animator and writer. I grew up mostly in Groton, Massachusetts, but and started my education at the School of Visual Arts in New York. I transferred to Mass Art during COVID, and my background is primarily in animation. I started as an animator in high school and just never stopped. Currently, I work in Boston as an illustrator and motion graphic designer, and also here at Western Ave, where I pursue all of my personal projects. I don't identify primarily as a graphic designer. I do a lot of design work, but honestly, my work within the graphic design world, I work in interactive media, is primarily illustration, video editing, animation, and then graphic design on top of that. To fill in gaps where other people aren't doing them. But I don't primarily work with design. And design is super confusing. It's so hard. It's so confusing. My process is very content focused. I don't really consider medium at all. I really believe that medium should follow content. So whatever the demands of a concept are should be followed by the medium. So if a project could be done best by animating it, then I will animate it. I'm really interested in research-based projects and like really long, like mull things over. But I also work best when I'm working on things simultaneously. So right now I have a bunch of paintings going, and usually I'm working on 3 paintings at a time, actively rotating them out in each session. Part of that is for materials. My paintings in each little series of, even if they're not related, tend to have a lot of the same colors in whatever batch of that day is, just so that I don't waste paint. But I also like to work that way, just like to maintain focus and momentum. If I stop moving, like I'm gonna stop moving, so gotta keep it interesting and smooth. On a very basic level, our society does not hold space for art, even though I honestly believe it's like a very necessary human behavior, even if it's not a career path. But we don't hold space for these natural things that we don't consider, that we can't like pull capital from, honestly. Barriers to becoming an artist are very financial. Mass Art is a great institution in terms of creating an arts education that is about as accessible as it gets, but at the end of the day, it's still very expensive. And if you don't have a support system, it's very hard to go, let alone to take a risk like that. I've found that art schools in general do not prepare students for entering the world after school. Many of them are very great training programs for developing the skills, and so you're ready, but you don't know how to make those connections necessarily, or where to go, or how to get there. But there are a lot of arts jobs out there. More than ever, there are strange, niche, creative jobs out there, and so it's not implausible, but we don't make that path clear. I have found personally that talking to other artists who are working even in different fields always to be beneficial. This is like a shallow way to look at it, because it's beneficial like personally and enriching personally, but also the people that you least expect it will later down the line be able to give you work and will have projects that they'll think of you for. And so if you're on people's minds and you're in people's mouths, like you'll either be able to give your friends work or your friends will give you work. And that is how the majority of art jobs are gotten. Like they're given to you by people that you know and met and spoke with this about. A good artist needs, more than anything, is to be making all the time, to be making in public, to be making constantly. The best drawing teacher that I ever had me do a minimum of 2 sketchbooks a semester, and to fill them completely, and just to draw every day constantly, to draw everywhere that I was, anything, all the time. It didn't matter. And that made me better. That made me so much better. And building that skill set is honestly like the best thing that you can do, because eventually, like, your work will get attention, but sometimes we focus too much on like what's next, and it's more important, I think, to develop your craft. There are a lot of issues that are important to me in particular. I deal a lot with my own transness in my work because it's my own material. But I also deal a lot with politics, with the current state of the world, with healthcare, with a number of other subjects. I think it's important to, as an artist, be thinking about the whole world around you and to be responding to the whole world around you, not just reacting, but actively responding. I don't believe that art can be apolitical. I think it's a little irresponsible to think that it can be. And the connection, and I think that thinking that art and politics are separate comes from a perception of politics as being disconnected from daily life. And if that's a perspective that you get to have, that's a great privilege and you should reconsider. Even if art is silly, even if art is just beautiful, it can't be apolitical because it is still in response and engaging with the world around it. And I think as artists, we have a responsibility to consider the context of our works at all times. There are discrepancies in success for artists across personal identifiers in all areas, but especially in fine art, it is primarily like wealthy, cis white people, primarily white men, who are able to find success and to find easy success as artists. There are absolutely opportunities, and there's definitely growing opportunities for like a full range of people, but it's growing from nothing, right? And so it's better, but it's not good. There are a lot of economic pressures that make it difficult to produce art. Traditional art by nature like takes up space. Digital art costs money, costs access to like resources, to tablets, to computers. Like there's a lot economically that is in the way of producing art. But also some of the best art is on scrap paper, is on places where like you wouldn't normally see it. So that art is still valuable. Like I don't want to discount like art that isn't like financially backed. But there are a lot of pressures. Like I don't have a car, and so like getting to like different things, moving materials. I'm very, very lucky to have a studio and to have space to keep these things. But if I didn't have space to keep these things, I wouldn't be making these things. I wouldn't be painting like physically. I wouldn't have the choice to experiment with other materials. There are definitely like just everywhere you turn economic barriers. The idea of marketing myself is gross. There is definitely a lot of pressure on artists to market themselves, to develop like a discernible and consistent style and to sell it. I find that the commercialization of art kills it. And as much as it is necessary to sustain yourself as an artist and to succeed as an artist, it is also often detrimental. And I go back and forth about how I feel about it all the time. And sometimes I think, oh, like I'll be super consistent. I'll like choose colors and fonts and like I'll make myself a little brand. And then by the next day I'm like, no, this is terrible. And so it definitely is important, especially in a world where like our collective short-term memory is smaller and smaller and smaller. Like you need to be recognizable and consistent. But I don't think that that makes good art. My advice for prospective artists that don't feel like they have the time, skill, or confidence to produce art is that you do. Whatever you want to create, I'm sure like most people don't have time for the big projects that they have ideas for, right? That's really hard, but everyone has time to draw, and everyone has, ultimately. If it's while you're commuting, if it's while you're in class, if it's while you're at work on the back of a seat, to be making something all the time so that there's something ready when you have the time, when the time shows up. Like the only way to get better art, like drawing in particular, but like any technical skill in art, it's a skill. This is not a talent. This is something that people can learn. This is something you can learn. Anyone can learn this. Anyone can draw technically well if they put in the time they draw. For every 1,000 drawings you'll make one good drawing, right? And so you draw 1,000 times, and every time you do that, every time that you just keep constantly making and making and making, and don't make finished things all the time. Don't push yourself there yet if you don't feel that you have the confidence. Just be making, be making, be making, be making. Lowell is different from other cities from an artist's point of view because Lowell is like still small in many ways, but it has like everything that's interesting about a city. It has like interesting places to be. I find Lowell much more enriching as an artist than Boston, because Lowell in many ways is like, it's not hostile, if that makes sense. Like also, like any city that is not designed for pedestrians is a little hostile, but it's not as hostile or sterile as places like Boston, I find. And I think that any city where you can interact with people when you go outside is a great place to be as an artist. And Lowell, I've found, is like a place where I can go outside and I can or I won't like talk to strangers, but like if I do, I'm always intrigued and it never feels like I'm having like a bad experience, even if it's complicated. I would love to see Lowell get more attention for how cool it is. Lowell's really awesome. I would love to see, this is not really art related, but it is art related. I would really love to see like some public funding in our public transportation and infrastructure. I know that that's like obviously like, but I think that connecting Lowell more to surrounding towns and to Boston, and letting people see how cool this place is and how interesting this place is will just help everyone, I think. And I would love to see more events. I would love to see more like larger and larger scale like artist events. Like the Town and City Music Festival is awesome. I want to see more of that. I want to see more public art. Lowell's so cool and beautiful, and I love the murals that have been going up. Those have been so cool. Just for people to keep doing more. It's going well, I think.